Thank you all for being with us today to celebrate the Older Americans Act.
The Older Americans Act is an enormously important piece of legislation.
More than 17% of Union County's population are over 60 years of age.
It's also about making sure that seniors can live a full life.
Without that Older Americans Act, too many of our senior citizens would be struggling. Many of them would face unconscionable poverty. This is something we need to defend, affirm, and make sure it's renewed.
As such, the Board of Chosen Freeholders takes great pride in the services that we provide to our older Americans. I want to thank you all for being with us today to celebrate the Older Americans Act that we're celebrating here today. More than 17% of Union County's population, that's about 93,000 people, are over 60 years of age, and that number continues to grow yearly. As such, the Board of Chosen Freeholders takes great pride in the services that we provide to our older Americans and strive every day to create a unique and innovative series of programs to serve you with. One thing that I appreciate about the Older Americans Act is the concept of preserving independence. Some of the greatest men and women in Western civilization were independent and vibrant geniuses and pioneers at the later stages of their lives. I'm inspired by reading about Grandma Moses doing brilliant work well into her 80s. I'm inspired by Verdi composing the opera Falstaff at 79. I'm inspired by Churchill being at retirement age when he began to lead Great Britain through World War II. I'm inspired by Andrew Jackson, who was actually 70 years of age when he left the White House. And of personal note, I'm inspired by one of my best friends, my grandfather, who I refer to as Dr. Reverend Grandpa, who became a PhD in theology at the age of 75. He's now 92. So he's been a reverend for quite a while. And he personally inspired me. One, because I got to see him working on his PhD. He worked on it with a typewriter instead of a word processor or a computer. He also taught me that at the age of 75, that I can be starting a new career. So if anyone has any ideas for me, I'm looking forward to starting a new career at the age of 75. The fact is that more and more seniors in America are becoming part of an army of people that are active and dedicated to making life better for themselves and those around them. They are taking their place at the table of life and continuing to contribute to and grow our communities. Their value cannot be enumerated. After all, few generations have spanned such a great transition in history. They have survived wars and depression, the evolution of civil movements, and epic change of communication and technology. Our community of seniors here have a wealth of experience and knowledge to share that can help us and future generations change the world. As such, I think it's our obligation, no, it's our duty to help in maintaining not only the quality, but the vibrancy of their lives for years to come. And it's the Older Americans Act that helps us to do this. So I want to thank the organizers of this event. I want to ask the Freeholder Board to come up and take a picture. I want to give a resolution to our senators, our federal senators, who are supporting this act and making sure that this act continues to help seniors for years to come. Thank you. Senator Linden.
Back in Union County with all of the freeholders, the tremendous work they do. With my colleague, Senator Booker, that resolution that the freeholder chairman just gave us, I gave it to him so that I could say to him, you remember those of us who are older along the way as what you'll have to do in the years to come. And I'm thrilled as I look at the audience. I feel like a gardener among so many flowers here. We have a lot of good-looking ladies here, so I'm thrilled to be here. Let me just say, I often think about what we in Washington do as it relates to those who have helped build our families, our communities, and our country. And earlier I was talking to the press about some of our challenges in transportation, and I said, we are living off the greatest generation's work and investment. And instead of building on that great work and investment, we are just living off of it. Instead of living and leading a way in which we ourselves would create a legacy, we are living off of a legacy. And so I think about what this great generation did. I think about my mother, who came to this country in search of freedom. She came to the greatest country in the world. She worked in the factories of Hudson County as a seamstress and worked long, hard hours, being able to try to put together enough money for her family to be sustained. I thought about her as we were talking about today's event, of the challenges she met in her life. Hard work and sacrifice, retiring from a job that had no private retirement security, where Social Security was her retirement security, and Medicare was her health care security, and then seeing her in the last 10 years of her life facing the enormous challenge of Alzheimer's. And I know that but for the decisions of our government at a different time to create a baseline of security for all of our seniors, she would not have lived with the dignity that she deserved in the twilight of her life. And to me, the Older Americans Act is an extension of what we did in building upon retirement security with Social Security, which is why I have fought all 23 years of my life in the United States Congress, not to privatize it, not to change it, but to build on it. That's why I refuse to let Medicare become a voucher instead of a government obligation to all who have worked and paid into it for so long. And it's why we celebrate the Older Americans Act, because when we look back, we're celebrating more than a piece of legislation. We are celebrating a commitment to those who worked hard, built families and communities over a lifetime, and said to them that they deserved, as they had now contributed so much and still contribute. I met one of the seniors who said, "Oh, I wish I could stay, but I have to take my granddaughter to a doctor's appointment because her mother is working." And the reality is seniors continue to give even after retirement. They give at church in their participation, they give in community groups, they take care of extended family, so they never stop giving. So sometimes when I hear some of my colleagues in the United States Senate say things like, well, you know, they have to be more responsible. They have been responsible for a lifetime. They are still being responsible today. And that's what the oldest Americans do. So in 1965, when the Older Americans Act was signed into law, it followed 2 weeks later by the law creating Medicare and Medicaid, marking one of the most productive periods the Congress ever had, particularly in this social commitment. And basically, we ensured that with Medicare, all seniors would have access to the health care they need. It's why, we have built upon that with the President's Affordable Care Act to ensure that seniors didn't have to choose between putting food on the table, paying their rent or their mortgage, and having access to life-saving, life-enhancing drugs. That should never be the choice in the greatest country in the world for any senior. And we built upon that with what we did in the prescription drug program. It's also about making sure that seniors can live a full life. You know, when you read the great documents that created our great country, whether the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution of the United States, it speaks about three fundamental things: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, you cannot fully enjoy your life if you are sheltered in your home and cannot ultimately get out because you have no transport. You cannot have liberty if you cannot fulfill your God-given potential. And you cannot have the pursuit of happiness if you are worried about getting a meal versus taking care of your prescription drugs. You cannot have the pursuit of happiness if you can't come together with other friends and seniors in a senior center like this great one here in Union County. You cannot achieve everything that we want for people who have shown that they can continue to serve our communities and our country. That's what the Older Americans Act was. And it has produced millions of dollars here in our state for critical programs, for nutritional programs, for senior centers, for transportation. As a matter of fact, Senator Booker and I, when we finish this event, are returning to Washington to continue to debate a federal transportation bill. And one of the things that I want to see in that transportation bill is how are we going to enhance senior mobility so that seniors can go anywhere they want to without having to worry that they cannot go. These are all parts of it. So I'll just close as I started remembering my mom. Whenever I have an issue, Medicare, Social Security, the Older Americans Act, transportation for seniors, prescription drugs, I think about her life. And as someone who sacrificed, so as I was growing up in a tenement, the first in my family to go to college, I realized that that was only made possible because of my late mom. And because of her sacrifices, I am able to be one of 100 United States senators in a country of 308 million people. And I want that to be honored in the lives of each and every one of you and each and every other American who has done so for their families and for this great country. Thank you so much.
This is truly a day of celebration, and I am so excited to be able to stand here before you and beside some great leaders. From our sheriff to our state senator to our freeholders. You all have a great group of people who work every single day to try to make us a better community. But the reality is today we are celebrating our country doing the right thing. Now, if you will indulge me, this is where I'm going to get in trouble because there's a bunch of TV cameras here. They're going to hold what I'm about to say against me. But I just need to tell a little joke. And now this is a dangerous thing to do. Politicians should not try to be funny. But I think this is going to make a point, and it's a story that was passed down to me through my family. And it is, what does Stephen Colbert say, a high level of truthiness. But it basically goes like this. My father says he was sitting in the back of a classroom when he was when a teacher walked in. He was a little boy, about 8 or 9 years old. And the teacher walks into the classroom and says, and forgive me for butchering the southern accent, but she says, "Class, today is about self-esteem. Anybody in this classroom thinks you're stupid, I want you to stand up right now." And my father said nobody moved, and the teacher stood there impatient, looking, staring down the boys and girls, and said, "Come on now, class, you think you're dumb? You think you're stupid? I want you to stand up right now. I want to know who you are. We're going to talk about self-esteem." And my father said nobody moved in the classroom, and she just looked there, standing there impatient and frustrated. So my father said he pushed his chair back and stood up proudly. And the woman looks at my father and says, "Boy, what's wrong with you? You think you're dumb? You think you're stupid?" And my father says he just scratched his head and says, "Well, shucks, ma'am, I don't think I'm stupid, but I didn't want you to be the only one standing." So look, I am standing before a whole bunch of folks who stood for me. You come from a generation that never gave up. You took often the most difficult trials and tribulations. You took life's challenges and hardships, and you were able to meet them and overcome. I stand before folks who are immigrants, folks who came here from the South, folks who dealt with poverty head on. I stand here before folks who stood up when their country called them and served in wars, who are veterans. I stand here before people who, when their spouses went off to war, they stood up and still took care of their families. I want you all to know that you have stood year after year believing in this country, fighting for this country, working for this country, helping to build America, helping to make it a more equal and just place as you fought for women's rights and civil rights and voting rights. And today we stand here together to celebrate folks doing the right thing, standing up for the core principles and values in this country that we still have to fight for. This idea that if you served your country in war or in the military, that you should be treated by your country when you come home with dignity and respect. That we are a nation that finds the money to send people off to war, or we should put up the money when they come home to take care of those people who sacrificed. We are a nation that if somebody has spent their whole life working hard, we believe in the idea that you should be able to retire with dignity and security, with good health care and good benefits. This is who we are as a country. And so I'm proud that we are celebrating today. But I tell you this, we are going to continue to fight. Because though we have things like the Older Americans Act, Senator Menendez has said it right. And I'm telling you right now, I am the luckiest senator in all of Washington, D.C. to have my senior senator be Robert Menendez. He is. I may be a little bit taller than him, but I look up to him a lot. And what he said earlier is right. Don't be mistaken. These fundamental ideas that we take care of our own, that we honor our senior citizens, are under assault. The challenges I hear with Social Security and people that want to cut it. Well, I'm actually one of those people that believes, with still millions of seniors living in poverty, that for those seniors, we need to find a way to raise Social Security so it's more of a living income. And so we have fights. We know that Medicare and Medicaid is still not perfect, and that we need work to do to make it even better than it is. But we will fight against anyone who wants to try to create a voucher for it, that wants to try to undermine it or weaken it or make it something that it was not intended to be. It is there for all of us and for our security, and then you who paid into it should have it there. And so these are the fights that we have before us. But I know, as Senator Menendez said, that we are in a different era. We know right now that middle-class wages have been stagnating and for many declining. We know that the cost of living keeps going up and up and up. When I was mayor, we knew something in our city, that we had over 10% of our kids were being raised by their grandparents. I'm sure that the most of the grandparents in this room right now, in fact, I'd love to see your hands. How many people are providing some kind of care for some kid, babysitting, something like that? And that's the point. What's being asked of our seniors now is even more than ever before. And that's why things like the Older Americans Act, we should celebrate what we've done, but we need to find ways to give more support and resources to those who are fighting to do what they still need to do with their families. So many people here have worked so hard for so long, but we face new challenges. We now have a nation that isn't investing where we should. Things like Alzheimer's and what my father died of, Parkinson's, these are diseases that we can conquer if we're willing to stand up and make the investments. And as people who are taking care of their spouses who are struggling, we need resources to make sure that we're supporting the caregivers as well. So we have work to do. Today is a day worthy of celebration as we remember the right things that we've done, but we still must make sure that we stand up. Senator Menendez mentioned his mother, and we all have sacred memories. This weekend coming up, I'm going to be going to Los Angeles for the memorial service and burial for my 96-year-old grandma. 96 years, she lived an extraordinary life. And I want you to know that as a young boy, I had two working parents. My grandmother and my grandfather were two of those folks who were there for me whenever I needed them. And when my parents needed a break, I still remember my grandmother piling us into an old beat-up Winnebago and driving us around America. I discovered this country through my grandma and my granddad. Two people that worked so hard, and during World War II, my father worked in the Willow Run bomber plant, building the planes that helped us to win the war. And my grandfather and grandmother were so proud of this country. I still remember my grandfather, this is where I get a lot of my corny jokes. He was driving through Yuma, Arizona. I asked him, Granddad, why do they call this Yuma, Arizona? And he goes, son, that's easy because there was a gunfight at the founding of this town, and one man drew and shot the other man, and when he got hit, he grabbed his heart and said, Yuma, and fell over. I'm sorry. I'll never be invited back. But I really want to end by saying this, and in honor of my grandmother. My grandparents were there for me every stage of my life. I'm so happy my grandmother got to see me being sworn in as a United States Senator. She showed up for my high school graduation, 8th grade graduation, college graduation, law school graduation. She was always there for me. Every time I looked up, she was always there. And she used to tell me those words. Every time something happened in my life that was special, she would always ground me to understand. She would say things like, son, please understand the success you're having now, it was dangerous for us to dream about when I was a child growing up. You can never ever forget where you came from. You've got strong roots in this country. There are people you don't even know through the kindness of their actions. That's why you're experiencing this country as you know it today. I want you to know, she would tell me, you can't pay those people back, but you can pay it forward. I want you to be there and the kind of leader that doesn't forget. I want you to be the kind of man that we raised you to be. Someone that stands up and fights for the right things. So I want you all to know today, as we get ready to go down to Washington, and this is going to be a tough week, and I love Senator Menendez, fighting for our cities, fighting for mass transportation, fighting for money for reliable bus service and train service. That every day Senator Menendez and I go down there, this Latino American and this young black guy, the only state in America, New Jersey, this is the kind of people we are, we love everybody, only state in America that has 2 minorities representing it. As we go down there, I know we're not going to have this feeling that we're fighting alone. Because as we go down there for every fight, from transportation to education to Social Security, when we stand on that floor, when we stand tall and when we stand proud, we're not standing alone. You're standing with us. Thank you very much. God bless you.